Hi, welcome back to the Med Device Cyber Podcast. I'm your host, Christian Espinosa. I'm here with a guest today, Dylan Horvath from Cortex Design. How's it going today, Dylan?
It's going well. How are you, Christian?
I'm doing good. A little bit tired. I was at an LSI conference last week and didn't get much sleep. Very busy, trying to get business and networking and just meeting more people in the community. So I think it's an important topic with design. I know you focus a lot on human factors with your design. Can maybe you talk a little bit about, I guess, what some of the biggest challenges are in the industry from a design perspective?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's certainly a greater appreciation of the need for great human factors engineering and how that relates to design. I think broadly in the medical device industry, design has been a bit of a laggard in being core to the development process, and the understanding of industrial design within North America isn't really very well understood either. It's largely thought of as look and feel, and in medical design is sort of thought of as human factors engineering, whereas we think of those things cohesively as a whole. So, at Cortex, we have a very human-centered design philosophy and process, but that is wrapped around an ISO 1345 QMS designed to get devices into the market quickly. So, as you know, safe and effective is core to all medical devices, but that doesn't mean they're commercially successful. So commercial success really means about market adoption, making sure you're designing a product that people want, that people understand how to use and can resonate with at first glance.
From a design perspective, and I took a class in college, human factors engineering. I never heard of what it was before then, but it's obviously super important for a physician or surgeon or anyone that's using these instruments because they're often in a operating room or somewhere where the circumstances are pretty high from a risk perspective. Like what are the, I guess, the main items that go into design? Is it done like initially, or you do a design and get it on the market, then kind of get some feedback and tweak it, or how does that process work?
Yeah, well, so it's so expensive to get products launched and through regulatory, and you really can't make very many changes without incurring a lot of expense. So design really has to, a good designer, a good product understands that human factors engineering has to take place from the beginning, from the very beginning. So a lot of the clients that we work with, they've gotten things past the point of benchtop prototype and, understanding that the science works and that there is likely to be a market there and there's reimbursement codes. But now they need to accelerate that towards commercialization and bring it under design controls. And, design controls for us really start with user requirements. So, there's indications for use and intended use statements that have to be understood from the beginning. And that leads into what a user requires the device to be. But, beyond the user, those are the bare bones requirements. Beyond the user, there's a lot of stakeholders that have to be involved in accepting your product into the market. So the people that use it may not be the people that buy it. And, the people that buy it may not be the people that decide whether or not it's going to be reimbursed. So all of those stakeholders have to be understood as well, and what their journey is, what their criteria for accepting a new product into the market is going to be, and so we broadly think of human factors engineering, or actually just the industrial design process of involving those stakeholders too, from a very early stage.
Yeah, that makes sense, and it sounds like very similar to cybersecurity. It should be done in the requirements phase and designed into the system, but often people wait to the very end and it causes all kinds of issues. I imagine with the design and human factors, the earlier on, just like cybersecurity, the better. And then from your experience in the industry, I see you've been in the industry for quite some time. Like, have you noticed any trends as far as design or cybersecurity that are moving one way or the other?
Hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, certainly, cybersecurity is becoming an increasing concern at the FDA, and with recent changes in the administration and some of the uncertainty around staffing and timing for market submissions, the FDA is under resourced right now. Hopefully, that won't continue to be the case, but making sure that your market submissions are buttoned up from A to Z, and that certainly includes cybersecurity. It's going to be increasingly difficult to go back and forth with the FTA and negotiate or try to understand what gaps there may be in the market submission. So yeah, I think it's really important, as you said, like if you consider some of these constraints too late in the game, it's very expensive to change. So that includes cybersecurity and access to microcontrollers or computing devices on the device, making sure that they're hardened or protected, and in a way that's going to be accepted first round. So rather than hiding behind a sort of ill-informed market submission or something that isn't 100% complete, I think the recommendation we're pushing forward is you have to have a very high quality submission right at the beginning.
Yeah, that's a good point. It sounds like if you do it the first time right, it'll save you a lot of effort, because what you alluded to is due to the cutbacks to the FDA and things, that the back and forth is going to just really, really delay your submission much more than it used to, it sounds like.
I think there's a lot more uncertainty right now. So, and certainly there's a lack of resources or diminishing resources there. So, you have to do more with less. And that certainly means minimizing back and forth communications, trying to get things right the first time, and being open and honest about what your gaps are. Open and honest with yourself, so that you can close those gaps before you put the submission in. If you're honest about your gaps, that's great. With the FDA personnel that you're dealing with, but that's probably not going to get your market accepted or your product accepted.
Yeah, I've heard a couple different things about the changes in the FDA and the current administration in the United States, that some people have a theory that it's going to be easier to get things through because there's not as many people at the FDA looking at medical devices anymore, so they might just like stamp it easier. Then some people have a theory that it's going to take longer because there's not as many people, so it's going to take longer to go through the approval process. And I guess time will tell, basically.
Yeah, time will tell. And if I was going to make a prediction, I would say you're probably going to have some that go through faster and some that just don't go through, rather than more of a middle ground.
Yeah. I was looking at your website, and I'm interested in your culture on your website. It's awesome. You have these 6 points on your culture, and I think they're very good things to have when you're working with a client. Like one of them, you have is empathy for the user, and I wrote a book about empathy and bringing like some emotional intelligence to high tech industries. Like, can you talk a little bit about your culture and how you got to where you have those 6 points? Like your last one is work with an eraser, for instance. Like how you got to those 6 points.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I've been running Cortex for a long time. I founded Cortex in '99, and we were not always a medical device company. We have become a medical device company over the last 10 years or so. And I guess what I discovered along the way was there are some clients that we didn't do well with. And then there were and staffing, there were some staff that's early on weren't good fits. And then I realized that, I needed to articulate what I believe to be a positive culture, or the culture that I could back up at Cortex. And I'm hoping actually when new clients come to us and they take a look at that page, and some of them it will repel. and some of them it will attract, and that's good. And both of those things are good. If you're misaligned on core values, it's very difficult to work together. And vice versa, if that really resonates and it feels like, okay, there's a culture fit here between, what we believe, we call them the core operating principles more than like core values. If we resonate on those core operating principles, we're more likely to have a good understanding and a positive engagement. And those operating principles are what we believe to be important in order to produce good products and good work.
Yeah, I think it's awesome you've established those. My first company, maybe similar to what you experienced, I noticed that 99% of my problems in the company were people did not share my values. So I established the values very similar to yours. And then also, as you mentioned, not every client is a good client. So you talked about repelling certain clients that don't align with your values. And I think that's an important point to consider, because a client that doesn't align with your values can really drain a lot of your time and emotional energy and your staff's time and resources, basically.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the ones that's I think is, maybe controversial or may repel is around failure or around experimenting and accepting failure. We're doing new things, and for the most part, these things have not been done before, and the process of iteration requires an acceptance of getting partway there. And sometimes it's the quickly ruling out certain design avenues or engineering solutions that you may think at the beginning was going to bear fruit, and then allowing that to occur and understanding that is part of the process, that there are going to be things that don't go the way you expect them to, or maybe don't even go the way you want them to. That's part of the process. And I've yet to find anyone working in this industry that can just predictably go from a napkin sketch to a product without encountering uncertainty or encountering challenges. The challenges are there. This is it's a challenging industry, but that's, if you are all aligned on that, and the best CEOs and leaders that we work with have been through that and they understand that. So if we can say that and they read it and agree, then we're probably going to be a better fit than someone who just wants to dictate a process from beginning to end without an understanding that things can fluctuate.
Yeah, I think redefining failure is an important topic. I think there's a lot of negative connotation around failure, but it's, like you said, it's a process. And as long as you're willing to, what I call the philosophy of Kaizen, is continuous and never-ending improvement. You're going to make a few missteps, but as long as you can reflect on that and make the improvements, ultimately that's the philosophy. I think that makes the most sense. And you mentioned you were doing design in a not just for MedTech. What was the shift towards the MedTech industry? Mm-hmm. Was that a certain client you had, or like what was that transition like?
Yeah. So yeah, we started doing work for mostly design and then manufacturing for components of medical devices. That was how we got our start. There was a company up here in Toronto called Labary Medical, and we worked with them on some component redesign and making things less expensive to manufacture in small volumes, but with very high quality. We kind of opened up the possibilities of what could be done in challenging volumes that some of their engineering teams have kind of dismissed. So that was how we started. And I just found the core values and the purpose behind developing medical devices and being able to help people. And literally reduce pain or give them abilities that they wouldn't have otherwise. Was just really well aligned with what I wanted to do in my life, and so I started finding the other people that had those same alignments, and at this point I think it would be difficult to go back and work on like a Bluetooth speaker. It's like it doesn't really have the same oomph as working on a phototherapy device for babies born with jaundice. It's like it doesn't have that same return on heartbeats, I guess, is what I would describe. So yeah, I think we got involved in this really big moonshot project called the Qualcomm Tricorder X Prize competition, which was this $10 million incentivized competition to create a doctor in a box. And we started that project in 2014, initially doing user experience for a very well engineered group of solutions that would satisfy the requirements of the X Prize. And as the project went on, at that time about half the entry was based around whether or not the user experience was positive. So we became shortlisted as one of 10 finalists with our work, and then we ended up being one of 3 winners in that competition. And designed a functioning medical device that monitored all 5 human vital signs continuously for 3 days. It was a wearable, and a base station that's had a built-in IVD system, and was able to detect and diagnose 15 chronic human health conditions. And we did this all in an extremely short period of time. It was really challenging. We kind of blew our brains out doing it, but that really consolidated my interest in going into that field. And so then we went after having our quality management system certified, and we started with 9001. Then we got 1345 and added manufacturing, and so we've now we're really honed around producing very high quality consumer MedTech devices.
Yeah, awesome, and congrats on the competition there. It sounds the doctor in the box sounds interesting. It sounds like a lot of pressure, short amount of time, but you pulled it off.
Yeah, it was really nuts. There was a waiver by the FDA for the typical delays in doing trials for human trials. There was like bioethics safety, and the FDA was actually an integral part of the competition, but we didn't have that same waiver in Canada. So we had a much more challenging time going through getting ethics approval and time to keep up with the competition. But yeah, despite that, we ended up being one of 3. I think there were like 313 entries globally, and so being one of 3, we felt like, okay, I think we must know what we're doing here. That felt good.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think it's a similar experience for me. Like, I've done traditional cybersecurity for a long time, and protecting credit card information and medical records is fine, but I think helping innovators bring a new product to market and making sure that product is secure is much more rewarding, because a lot of these products are enhancing someone's lives and basically changing humanity for the positive in my experience. So it's kind of cool to be part of the journey, especially with some of these. It's often just an MD that had a great idea and he hires a CTO, and to be part of that journey of bringing that product or that new invention to life is pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's really great work, and I think there's certainly been incidences of cybersecurity breaches that have caused patient harm, and it certainly wasn't intended by the people that developed them, but those penetrations can happen, and if things aren't well designed from the beginning, and those risks understood. So I think the increased focus on that by the FDA and by other markets is important. So, and your particular specialty is a really great niche that everybody needs as well, right? So that's yeah, I can understand why that work would feel rewarding.
Yeah, everybody needs it. If there's software, obviously, I think one of the challenges is lack of awareness. A lot of people don't know what they don't know from a cybersecurity perspective, and they wait to the very end and try to bolt cybersecurity onto the product, which that's not as effective as obviously having the requirements and designing cybersecurity into the product. But it's I think it's an awareness challenge. So from Blue Goat Cyber's perspective, we're trying to raise that awareness that people should be considering cybersecurity when they're doing the requirements, because cybersecurity is like a non-functional requirement. It's not required to make the device work. So I think because of that, it's often overlooked because it's not really a functional requirement, but it is a security requirement that can have ramifications later on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a bad user experience if your medical device gets hacked and provides the wrong treatment.
It is, and from a design perspective, because we deal with a lot of different devices, and we always look at the design. Like, are they covering up interfaces that don't need to be exposed? Is the touchscreen designed a certain way where we can't, do a pattern and bypass the touchscreen and get in as an administrator? Like, from a design perspective, do you consider these areas from a security standpoint?
Well, yeah. I mean, you have to now, and there is so many things to consider at the beginning, right? And I guess most founders are not that concerned with it right at the beginning, whereas more mature companies have experience with this and will be aware of what the requirements are going to be from a very early stage. So as a service provider, it's important to introduce it at the right time, and certainly it may not be the most important problem to solve during the ideation phase. But when you start to get into producing parts and producing circuit boards and doing verification testing, and the requirement comes in then and requires a pause and a redesign, or at the worst, like spinning circuit boards and changing firmware after you've already gotten past a certain verification process. That can be really, really expensive. If you're already doing IEC 60601 testing at a test lab, and you just burned through $50,000, and then you have to change the circuit board. That's a real expensive mistake.
Yeah, we had a client that made a decision like 2 years ago about a microcontroller to use, for instance, and that microcontroller did not support secure boot. Secure boot is now a requirement from the FDA. So because of that decision a long time ago, which probably seems like an easy decision to make, they had to basically make their device stand alone to get it approved by the FDA, because the initial plan was to have it connected to a cloud app and everything else. But because of that lack of the secure boot functionality of the microcontroller, they couldn't get it approved that way. The risk was too high. So I think a lot of people don't consider these design decisions early on can have, like you said, a lot of ramifications if you have to undo it or redo all the work later on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and things that can be good at the engineering stage, or requirements that are important to have in there for the designers and the engineers that are developing the device, does not mean it needs to be in the final product. And I think there can be a real disconnect where you see a user interface for a physical device that is so confusing that only the designer can really understand it, and then you try and wrap that around instructions for use that describe how to use the interface, but mistakes still happen. So considering not just from a software perspective, but also from a hardware perspective, what things are in there for you as the designer versus what things really need to be in there for the final user and for a market that gets excited about it. And it's not easy to do firmware updates once the product is released, or it could be from an engineering perspective easy to do, but updating things routinely is not something that is inexpensive to do or fast to do. So, I think it's really important to, if you don't want to incur those expenses, and, some companies want to get to market really quickly, and then, add in other features as they go, but they should go in, with their eyes wide open if that's going to require more money and more expenses. It's a convoluted way of coming back around to vulnerabilities and things that are in there so that you can release a product and update it later. You got to consider whether or not that's worth the risk and protect and mitigate it accordingly.
Yeah, it sounds like this industry is very challenging. There's a lot of things to consider to bring a product to market. The design is definitely a consideration. I know at the LSI conference last week, the booth next to us, we had a booth there. They had this product where you could a physician could hover over a keyboard, and it would automatically, based on your pattern, it would automatically do certain things. Because I guess one of the challenges is, in an OR, you've got gloves on, you may have fluids on your hands, and you can't really touch a keyboard. So, there's different things from a design perspective, like hovering, and I never really thought about all this. But one of the people that works for my company now, my VP of sales, used to be a cardiologist, and he's talking about how great these inventions are because in the OR, without these things, he didn't have them all. His life was much more difficult. So I think the design scenarios are very unique in MedTech, at least from my experience. I would imagine that's your experience as well.
Yeah, well, I think we think of design as the whole thing, not just the look and feel. It's really the experience that is designed for a stakeholder to have. Not just how it's held or how it's operated. But that's certainly a component of it, and it's shocking how often it's ignored. We were at the MedTech conference in Toronto this past fall, and there was a large company that had one of their most recent products. I won't name names, but the person that was at the booth was. It was kind of a cool looking device, it drew attention just because, it was kind of like a cool techie piece of gear. But it was handheld, and it was so heavy and it was so large that the person who was even showing it at the booth couldn't operate it. And
that's not good.
This was not this was a young woman who, would clearly have been one of the people that should be able to operate a device. It just astounds you to see those sort of things pushed through when no one's going to want to use it. But it still happens, right? Because it's like there's this kind of belligerence about thinking that you're right in the engineering, that this solves a problem and people will get excited about the solution. But if you don't check continually with formative usability studies on things that are probably nagging you in the back of your mind, or maybe members of your team that's whisper in the back corner, I don't think this is really going to be something anybody likes. This poor person was at the booth pushing this new product, and I think it was embarrassing.
Yeah, that's it's interesting that a product could get that far. along, like you said, without anyone saying time out. This is not going to work. But I think that happens quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I sometimes say, like, if you design a product that you really like, you'll get a sale of one. It doesn't matter what you like. You need to make sure that the people that you're trying to sell it to like it. And if you never check with them, it's very unlikely you're going to nail it.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And we at the LSI conference, I watched a lot of pitches from innovators trying to get investors, and having the product that there is a market for, where other people will like, not just the innovator, is certainly one of the things that the investors are looking for. They don't care how cool the product is; they want to see like how many people actually need this product, and does it solve a specific problem, and what price point can you sell it for based on how much it costs you to make it. So there's a lot of moving pieces in the industry, and it's very interesting.
Yeah, certainly a large patient population doesn't indicate you've got a large market base.
The which population?
A patient population, or like a population with a particular chronic condition or something, that could benefit from your medical device. That doesn't mean that you're able to sell to them.
Yeah, because there's also the insurance factor and other things that go into this as well. Yeah. So
yeah,
it's
a lot of things that, if you're a technology developer, you're not necessarily going to get super excited about, but if you, unfortunately, you need to design for all of those parameters. And we've seen companies that have tried to enter the US market and realize that they don't have the right billing codes. Like that there is no billing code for the way their diagnostic has been designed. And that can be a very expensive time to realize it, once the product is already, cooked and done, and having to go back.
Awesome. Well, I think we're running up here on time. Any words of wisdom from a design perspective or cybersecurity perspective for anyone listening to our podcast?
Well, I think that one of the cool things about this industry is it is growing. We've got a massive demographic shift happening, where the aging population, or the ratio of working adults to aging adults, is going to be 2 to 1 in the next 10 years. Which means that our hospitals and clinics are going to be very, very busy, and staffing requirements are more and more challenging. So there's a lot of work to be done, decentralizing and democratizing access to healthcare in order to maintain a good quality of life for us here. And so it's an exciting field to be in. The return on investment is unusually high in physical device design, medical device design in particular. And so partnering with good firms and understanding what the requirements are going to be during those market submissions to get to market success and not just safe and effective. There's a lot of great work to be done. It's fun to be part of.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks so much for being on our podcast as a guest, Dylan. And I know your website is cortex-design.com. I'm assuming people can find you on LinkedIn as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And happy to have people follow us on LinkedIn. Cortex-design.com. We're in Toronto, Canada, and we're a Class 2 medical device design company. Very excited to hear from you, and Christian. We're looking forward to working with you in the future too.
Yeah, for sure. All right, awesome. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in.